I'm Ronald, 34, a financial advisor who once trusted my sister Rebecca with everything. That trust shattered when my credit card was declined and strange tax notices arrived. Discovering she'd stolen my identity for an $800,000 fraud scheme devastated me. At our regular dinner, I slid a police report across the table. Her confident smile vanished, instantly replaced by pure terror. That moment changed our family forever. Before I share this painful story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted? Hit like and subscribe to join me on this journey of deception and justice. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Boston, Rebecca and I shared the kind of bond that most siblings would envy. She was 3 years younger, with the same auburn hair and green eyes that ran in our family, though she had our mother's delicate features while I took after our father's more angular face. Our childhood home on Maple Street had a big backyard where we built snow forts in winter and caught fireflies in summer. Those early years were filled with the typical sibling dynamics. I taught her to ride a bike. She followed me everywhere, and yes, we fought over the television remote and the last cookie. Our parents, Thomas and Eleanor, worked hard to give us comfortable lives. Dad ran a small accounting firm while Mom taught at the local elementary school. They emphasized education, honesty, and family loyalty above all else. Rebecca and I absorbed these values like sponges, or at least I thought we both had. Everything changed when our parents divorced. I was 15, Rebecca just 12. The arguing had been building for months, but nothing prepared us for the moment. Dad packed his suitcases and moved to an apartment across town. Mom cried for weeks. I remember holding Rebecca as she sobbed, promising her that I would always be there, that we would get through this together. The divorce transformed our relationship. I became more than a brother. I became her protector, confidant, and sometimes even a parent figure. When Mom worked late to make ends meet, I cooked dinner, helped Rebecca with homework, and made sure she made it to soccer practice on time. I checked for monsters under her bed, even though she was too old for such things, because the divorce had awakened new fears in both of us. After high school, I attended Boston University on a partial scholarship, studying finance while working part-time at a local bank. Even with my busy schedule, I made time for Rebecca. Every Sunday, I would return home and take her out for ice cream, listening to her high school dramas and offering what wisdom an older brother could provide. When she had trouble with calculus, I tutored her until midnight. When her first boyfriend broke her heart, I was the one who brought her chocolate and sat through tearful viewings of romantic comedies. My career in financial advising took off quickly after college. I had a knack for explaining complex financial matters in simple terms, and clients appreciated my meticulous attention to detail. By 28, I had a corner office at Richardson Financial Group, a growing client list, and a reputation for integrity in an industry often viewed with suspicion. Rebecca's path wasn't as straightforward. She graduated from Massachusetts State with a marketing degree, but struggled to find her footing professionally. Her first job at an advertising agency lasted 8 months before budget cuts eliminated her position. The digital marketing firm that hired her next underwent a merger, and she was let go. A startup social media company folded 6 months after she joined. With each setback, I reassured her that finding career stability takes time. Despite living in different parts of Boston, we maintained our close relationship into adulthood. Our weekly dinner tradition began when she was 23, newly unemployed and going through a painful breakup with her longtime boyfriend, Thomas. She called me crying, and I immediately drove to her apartment, finding her surrounded by tissues and empty ice cream containers. Instead of just comforting her there, I insisted on taking her to Antonio's, an Italian restaurant we both loved, saying a change of scenery would help. That dinner became our ritual every Thursday at 7, same table by the window, same waiter named Frank who eventually knew our orders by heart. During one particularly difficult period when Rebecca was between jobs, I loaned her $3,000 for rent and utilities. When her car broke down 6 months later, I helped her finance a new one, co-signing the loan since her credit wasn't strong enough yet. When she needed a security deposit for a new apartment after her roommate moved out unexpectedly, I wrote the check without hesitation. Each time she promised to repay me when she could, and I always told her the same thing: that's what family is for. About 2 years ago, Rebecca's fortunes seemed to turn. She landed a marketing position at what she described as a growing financial technology company. Suddenly, she was the one suggesting more expensive restaurants for our weekly dinners. Her wardrobe transformed from fast fashion to designer labels. She moved from her cramped apartment with a roommate to a sleek one-bedroom in one of Boston's trendier neighborhoods. She even surprised me with expensive birthday gifts, a high-end watch 1 year, premium Celtics tickets the next. I was genuinely happy for her. After watching her struggle for years, seeing her succeed filled me with brotherly pride. When I asked about her company, she spoke in vague but enthusiastic terms about disrupting the financial space and innovative investment vehicles. I assumed her reluctance to share details stemmed from confidentiality agreements common in the financial world. Besides, her success seemed apparent in her growing confidence and lifestyle improvements. Why would I question it? During our Thursday dinners, Rebecca began picking up the tab more often, waving away my protests. "You've helped me for years, Ron," she would say. "Let me treat my successful big brother for once." Her generosity seemed like a natural evolution of our relationship, a sign that we were now on more equal footing. I interpreted her newfound financial freedom as the universe finally rewarding her persistence after years of setbacks. Little did I know that every smile across the dinner table, every generous gesture, every excited career update was part of an elaborate performance. The sister I had protected, supported, and trusted implicitly was hiding a betrayal so profound it would shatter not just our relationship, but my entire sense of security and identity. The first sign that something was wrong came during an important client dinner at the Capitol Grill. I had spent weeks pursuing the Andersons, a wealthy couple looking to restructure their retirement portfolio. After their entrees arrived, I excused myself to use the restroom. When I returned, Mr. Anderson was awkwardly studying his steak while Mrs. Anderson gave me a sympathetic look. "Your card was declined," she said quietly. "We went ahead and put it on ours." My face burned with embarrassment. I had plenty of available credit and had just paid the bill. I apologized profusely, insisting on reimbursing them in cash, which, thankfully, I had enough of in my wallet. "These things happen," Mr. Anderson said kindly, but I could see the flicker of concern in his eyes. In my business, financial stability wasn't just personal, it was professional. A declined credit card raised questions about my own financial management skills. The next morning, I called my credit card company. After navigating the automated system and verifying my identity, a representative named Jamal informed me that my card had been temporarily frozen due to suspicious activity. "We detected several large purchases in Miami yesterday," he explained. "Since you've never used your card in Florida before, our system flagged it as potential fraud." "I've never been to Miami," I confirmed, a knot forming in my stomach. Jamal listed off the charges: a $5,000 purchase at a luxury boutique, a $3,000 dinner at an exclusive restaurant, and an attempted $12,000 charge at a high-end jewelry store which had triggered the security freeze. "We'll remove these fraudulent charges and send you a new card," Jamal assured me, "but I'd recommend checking your credit report. If someone has your card information, they might have access to other accounts." I thanked him and immediately pulled up my credit monitoring service. What I saw made my blood run cold. 6 new credit accounts had been opened in my name over the past 3 months. 2 premium credit cards, a personal loan, a line of credit and financing for what appeared to be a luxury vehicle. I spent the entire day on the phone, moving from one financial institution to another, filing fraud claims and explaining that I hadn't opened these accounts. Each conversation left me more confused and alarmed. How had someone obtained enough of my personal information to open these accounts? How had they bypassed the security questions and identity verification measures? The following week, a thick envelope arrived from the Internal Revenue Service. Inside was a notice regarding discrepancies in reported income from several businesses registered under my Social Security number. Businesses I had never heard of, let alone owned: Pinnacle Investment Opportunities LLC, Summit Financial Consulting Group, and Elite Wealth Management Associates. The letter stated that these businesses had reported nearly $2 million in revenue over the past year, but the quarterly tax payments were inconsistent with the reported income. The IRS was requesting clarification and warning of potential penalties for underreported taxes. My initial reaction was to assume some massive computer error or mix-up of records. Perhaps another Ronald with a similar Social Security number had been incorrectly linked to my tax records. I called the IRS immediately and spent 3 hours being transferred between departments explaining and re-explaining my situation. The IRS agent I finally spoke with, Barbara, was sympathetic but firm. The businesses were registered with your Social Security number, date of birth, and address history. They even used your college information for security verification. This doesn't look like a random error, Mr. Wilson. This appears to be deliberate identity theft. Barbara advised me to file a police report immediately and contact the Federal Trade Commission to begin an identity theft claim. She also suggested I place fraud alerts on my credit reports and consider a credit freeze until the situation was resolved. That evening I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by papers, my laptop open to my credit report, which now showed my near-perfect credit score had plummeted nearly 200 points. The report listed 27 credit inquiries in the past 6 months and a current debt-to-income ratio that would make any financial advisor cringe. I methodically called each credit bureau to place fraud alerts on my accounts and request credit freezes. Each representative asked the same questions, and I recited the same answers, feeling increasingly numb as the magnitude of the situation became clear. The next morning I visited my local police precinct to file an identity theft report. Officer Jenkins took my statement, his expression growing increasingly concerned as I detailed the extent of the fraud. "This isn't a random case of someone finding your wallet or guessing your password," he said, reviewing my documentation. "The level of personal information required to execute fraud at this scale suggests someone with intimate knowledge of your life and history." His words hung in the air as an uncomfortable thought began to form in my mind. Who had that level of access to my personal information? Who knew enough about my history to answer security questions about my first car, my mother's maiden name, or the street I grew up on? The list was frighteningly short. I returned home and opened my filing cabinet, checking the folder where I kept important documents. My Social Security card was there, but as I flipped through other papers, I noticed gaps. Several bank statements were missing. A folder containing copies of old tax returns had fewer documents than I remembered. My passport was in place, but had it been moved slightly from its usual position. My sister had a key to my apartment for emergencies. She had watched my place when I traveled for business. She had access to my home, my documents, my life story, and my trust. I pushed the thought away immediately. Rebecca wouldn't do this. Not my sister. Not the little girl I'd protected throughout our parents' divorce. Not the young woman I'd supported through career setbacks and heartbreaks. There had to be another explanation. But the seed of suspicion had been planted, and in the coming days it would grow into an unavoidable truth that would devastate everything I thought I knew about my family. The day after filing the police report, I received a call from Detective Sarah Martinez, who had been assigned to my case. "Identity theft cases of this magnitude are unusual," she explained. "The dollar amount and the sophistication suggest an organized operation. I'd like to meet with you to discuss the details further." We arranged to meet at the police station that afternoon. Detective Martinez was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, with a no-nonsense demeanor that I found reassuring. She listened carefully as I walked her through the timeline of discoveries, taking detailed notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. "Have you hired a private investigator?" she asked after I finished. "The police will investigate, of course, but our resources are stretched thin, and financial crimes can be complex and time-consuming. A good PI might be able to move more quickly." I hadn't considered that option, but her suggestion made sense. Detective Martinez recommended Michael Dawson, a former financial crimes detective who now worked privately. He specializes in identity theft and financial fraud. If anyone can follow this money trail, it's Mike. The next morning I met with Michael Dawson in his modest office downtown. He was a burly man with salt and pepper hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. The walls were lined with credentials and thank you letters from previous clients. Walk me through everything he said, and once again I recounted my discovery of the fraud, the accounts, the businesses, and the tax implications. What about suspects? Dawson asked, leaning back in his chair. In cases like this, it's rarely a stranger. The access needed to pull this off usually points to someone close. I hesitated, the suspicion I'd been fighting still difficult to voice. I've considered, but I can't believe. Your sister Dawson finished for me, watching my expression closely. My surprise must have been evident. How did you know? Experience. You mentioned she has access to your home, knowledge of your personal history, and has recently displayed a significant lifestyle upgrade without clear explanation. Plus, your reluctance to name her speaks volumes. I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and dismay, that my unspoken suspicions seemed obvious to an objective observer. I'll need to look into her as well as follow the money trail, Dawson said. I'll be discreet, but thorough. Can you provide me with her full name, current address, and workplace information? I gave him Rebecca's details, each word feeling like a betrayal, even though I was the one who had been betrayed if my suspicions proved correct. Dawson promised to begin immediately and update me within a few days. True to his word, Dawson called 3 days later. I've found some interesting information about the businesses registered in your name. Can you come to my office this afternoon? When I arrived, Dawson had several folders spread across his desk and multiple windows open on his computer. The 3 companies registered under your social security number all list a managing director named Robert Wilson, supposedly you. The business registration documents were filed online using your personal information. He turned his monitor toward me, showing incorporation documents bearing a signature that superficially resembled mine but was clearly forged. The businesses all operate from virtual offices with mail forwarding services. On paper, they appear to be legitimate financial advisory firms offering exclusive investment opportunities to clients. In reality, they seem to be nothing more than shells designed to collect investor funds. Dawson clicked to another screen showing a banking statement. The money flows in from various investors, then immediately gets transferred through several accounts before ending up here. He pointed to an account number. This account belongs to a holding company called RW Enterprises. I don't own any such company, I said. No, you don't, Dawson agreed. But guess who does? RW Enterprises was created by Rebecca Wilson 6 months ago. My stomach dropped. That could be coincidental, I said weakly, still grasping for alternative explanations. There's more, Dawson said gently. I obtained security footage from First National Bank where one of your fraudulent accounts was accessed in person. He pulled up a video file and pressed play. The grainy footage showed a bank lobby, and then a woman approached the teller window. Even from the overhead angle, there was no mistaking her. Rebecca, my sister, was conducting business at a bank, using an account in my name. She presented ID in your name, Dawson explained. Likely a forged driver's license. She withdrew $8,000 in cash that day. I stared at the screen, watching my sister smile at the teller sign, a withdrawal slip, and walk away with a large envelope that presumably contained my money. The evidence was irrefutable, but my mind still struggled to accept it. The email addresses used to open these fraudulent accounts are variations of your name but registered to IP addresses that trace back to Rebecca's home and office, Dawson continued. And the phone numbers listed as contact information for these accounts belong to prepaid phones purchased with her credit card. He slid a folder toward me. This contains records of luxury purchases made in recent months that correspond with your sister's new lifestyle. Designer clothing, expensive restaurants, a new Mercedes leased under one of the shell company names but driven exclusively by her. She put a down payment on a waterfront condominium last month. I flipped through the pages, each one documenting another piece of my sister's betrayal. Credit card statements showing lavish spending, lease agreements, property records, and most damning of all, photographs Dawson had taken of Rebecca entering her new building, driving her new car, shopping at high-end stores on Newbury Street. The total amount diverted from fraudulent accounts opened in your name appears to be approximately $800,000. Dawson said, his voice gentle but firm. Some of this money came from legitimate investors who believed they were working with you, or companies you represented. Those people are victims too, and they may have legal recourse against you unless you can prove this was done without your knowledge or consent. The room seemed to spin around me. $800,000, dozens of victims, my sister, my reputation, my life. What do I do now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You have options, Dawson replied. You can take this evidence directly to Detective Martinez and press charges immediately. Your sister would likely be arrested within days. Or you can confront your sister first, perhaps with the hope of getting her to make restitution voluntarily before the criminal justice system takes over. But I should warn you, in cases like this, the perpetrator rarely comes clean easily. They've convinced themselves they're entitled to what they've taken. I nodded slowly, taking the folder of evidence. I need time to think, to process all this. Of course, Dawson said. But don't wait too long. Your sister might realize the walls are closing in, and she could attempt to flee or hide assets. As I left Dawson's office with the weight of evidence in my hands, I felt like I was carrying the remains of my relationship with Rebecca. Every photograph, every bank statement, every forged document was another nail in the coffin of the bond I thought we shared. The next 3 days passed in a blur. I called in sick to work something I had rarely done in my career. The thought of advising clients on protecting their financial futures, when I had failed to protect my own, seemed unbearable. How could I face them knowing that my own sister had used my identity to defraud innocent people? I barely slept. When exhaustion finally overcame me, nightmares jolted me awake. Rebecca laughing as she signed my name on documents, my clients pointing accusatory fingers, prison bars closing around me for crimes I didn't commit. I would wake up gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, reaching for my phone to check if more fraud alerts had arrived. Food lost its taste. The coffee I normally savored each morning turned bitter on my tongue. I lost 6 pounds in that short period, my clothes hanging looser on my frame. My neighbor Sandy knocked on my door, concerned after seeing me stumble to my mailbox looking like death warmed over, as she put it. I sat for hours in my darkened living room, blinds drawn, replaying memories of Rebecca throughout our lives. The little girl who had followed me around like a shadow, the teenager who had confided her dreams and fears, the young woman who had celebrated my career successes with genuine pride. Had it all been an act? Had she always seen me as someone to use, to exploit? Or had something changed? Had desperation driven her to this betrayal? Had she started with a small deception that spiraled out of control? I grasped for explanations that might make her actions comprehensible, that might preserve some shadow of the sister I thought I knew. On the second day of my self-imposed isolation, I called Dr. Lillian Chen, a therapist I had seen briefly after a difficult breakup years earlier. She agreed to see me immediately, sensing the urgency in my voice. In her calm, sunlit office, the story poured out of me in a torrent of confusion, anger, and grief. Dr. Chen listened without interruption, her expression compassionate but neutral. "What you're experiencing is a profound trauma," she said when I finally fell silent. "Betrayal by a family member attacks our most fundamental sense of security and identity. The person who was supposed to love and protect you has instead caused you harm. That creates a particular kind of psychological injury." "I keep trying to understand why," I said. "What did I miss? What signs should I have seen?" "Those questions are natural, but be careful not to take responsibility for her actions," Dr. Chen cautioned. "Skilled manipulators are expert at hiding their true intentions. Your trust in your sister wasn't a failure on your part. It was a normal expression of family love." I nodded, though her words provided little comfort. "I feel like I don't know who she is anymore, and that makes me question who I am. If I was so wrong about the person closest to me, what else am I wrong about? Who can I trust?" "Trust issues are a common response to betrayal," she acknowledged. "Working through those feelings will take time. For now, focus on practical steps to protect yourself and decide how you want to handle this situation legally and personally." As I left her office, Dr. Chen scheduled another appointment for later that week. "This isn't something you should process alone," she insisted. "Having support is crucial right now." Back at home, the evidence folder from Michael Dawson sat on my coffee table like a ticking bomb. I forced myself to go through each document again methodically, professionally, as if this were a client's problem rather than my own. I created a timeline of the fraud, noting each account opening, each significant withdrawal, each business registration. The pattern that emerged was one of escalating boldness. Rebecca had started with small accounts, testing the waters before moving on to larger fraud as her confidence grew. My phone rang constantly, clients wondering why their meetings had been rescheduled, colleagues concerned about my uncharacteristic absence. My boss, Frank Richardson, left increasingly worried messages. "Ronald, whatever's going on, we can work through it," his latest voicemail said. "But I need to know you're okay. Call me." I finally did, offering a vague explanation about a family emergency requiring my attention. Frank was understanding, but firm. "Take the time you need, but keep me in the loop. Your clients are asking questions I can't answer." The mention of my clients sent a fresh wave of anxiety through me. My reputation was my most valuable professional asset. If word got out that my identity had been used in a massive fraud scheme, would clients lose confidence in me? Would they wonder if I had been complicit? The financial advising world was built on trust, and once lost, that trust could be nearly impossible to regain. I hadn't told my parents yet. They were in their 70s now, living in a retirement community in Florida. Dad's heart condition had worsened in recent years, and Mom had become his primary caregiver. How could I tell them that their daughter had criminally betrayed their son, that the family they had raised, despite the divorce and difficulties, had fractured in this fundamental way? The isolation became unbearable by the third day. I forced myself to shower, change into fresh clothes, and walk to the small park near my apartment. The simple act of feeling sunshine on my face and watching dogs chase balls offered a momentary respite from the chaos in my mind. A young father pushed his laughing toddler on a swing, the child's joy so uncomplicated, so pure. I wondered if I would ever feel that kind of simple happiness again. As I walked home, my phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca: "Still on for dinner tomorrow night. Antonio's at 7. Our regular Thursday dinner." In the maelstrom of discovery and devastation, I had forgotten about our standing engagement. My first impulse was to ignore the message, to cut her out of my life immediately and completely. But another part of me needed answers that only she could provide. Why had she done this? How long had she been planning it? Had any part of our relationship been genuine? I texted back, "Yes, see you then." That evening, I called Michael Dawson and Detective Martinez in succession, informing them of my decision to confront Rebecca before pursuing formal charges. Both cautioned me about the risks, but provided guidance on how to handle the conversation. "Recorded if your state allows single-party consent recordings," Dawson advised. "Don't make accusations without presenting evidence, and be prepared for denial, anger, and manipulation. She won't give up the charade easily. Be careful not to say anything that could be construed as blackmail or extortion," Detective Martinez warned. "Don't suggest that you'll withhold going to the authorities in exchange for money or other considerations. That could complicate the legal case." I spent that night rehearsing what I would say, how I would remain calm in the face of whatever reaction Rebecca might have. By morning, I felt hollow but resolute. The time for denial and confusion had passed. The evidence was irrefutable. My sister had systematically stolen my identity, damaged my credit, compromised my professional reputation, and defrauded innocent people of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Tomorrow, at our usual table by the window at Antonio's, with Frank taking our familiar orders, I would confront the stranger who wore my sister's face. The morning before my confrontation with Rebecca, I met with Alicia Morales, a forensic accountant recommended by Michael Dawson. Her office was clinically organized, multiple monitors displaying spreadsheets and financial software I recognized from my own profession. "I've reviewed the documentation Mr. Dawson provided," she began, adjusting her glasses. "But I'd like to hear the situation from your perspective before sharing my analysis." I summarized the discovery of the fraud and the evidence pointing to Rebecca. Alicia listened intently, occasionally typing notes. "Identity theft between family members presents unique challenges," she said when I finished. The perpetrator has access to information and documentation that would be difficult for an outside criminal to obtain. This often results in more comprehensive and damaging fraud. She turned one of her monitors toward me, displaying a complex diagram of interconnected entities. Your sister created an elaborate network of fraudulent businesses using your identity. Pinnacle Investment Opportunities Summit, Financial Consulting, and Elite Wealth Management weren't merely empty shells. They were functioning entities that solicited and received investments from actual clients. My stomach tightened. Actual clients? You mean real people gave these fake companies money thinking they were investing? Exactly, Alicia confirmed. Based on the bank records, approximately 56 individuals or couples invested sums ranging from $5,000 to $75,000. The total investments amount to roughly $730,000. These people thought they were investing with me, with my expertise backing these companies. In some cases, yes. Your sister appears to have leveraged your professional reputation, claiming these were exclusive investment vehicles you had created for select clients. In other instances, she simply used your credentials and history to establish legitimacy for the businesses. Alicia clicked to another screen showing a series of luxury purchases. The money trail shows clear patterns of misappropriation. Your sister used investor funds for personal expenses, a Mercedes E-Class, leased for $82,000 designer clothing, totaling nearly $100,000 over 6 months, and a down payment of $150,000 on a waterfront condominium in the Seaport District. Each figure hit me like a physical blow. The scope of Rebecca's theft was staggering. These weren't impulsive purchases or temporary borrowing. This was calculated, extensive fraud. There's also evidence of international wire transfers. Alicia continued pulling up banking records. Approximately $200,000 has been sent to accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. These transfers were structured to avoid automatic reporting thresholds, another indication of deliberate financial deception. Can that money be recovered? I asked. Alicia's expression turned grim. International recovery is challenging, even with full cooperation from the account holder. Without that cooperation, the process becomes exponentially more difficult and may not be successful. She continued methodically through the evidence, revealing property purchases in my name, a vacation cabin in Vermont, timeshare interests in Florida and Mexico, luxury items including artwork, jewelry, and collectible watches, first-class travel to Paris, Tokyo, and Bali. The total known fraud amount is approximately $812,000, Alicia concluded. However, there are likely additional accounts and transactions we haven't yet discovered. What about taxes? I asked, remembering the IRS notices. Am I liable for taxes on all this fraudulent income? That's a significant concern, Alicia acknowledged. The businesses registered under your Social Security number reported substantial income but paid minimal taxes. The IRS will initially hold you responsible for approximately $240,000 in back taxes, penalties, and interest. I felt physically ill. Not only had Rebecca stolen my identity and defrauded dozens of innocent investors, but she had potentially left me with a tax liability that could take years to resolve. You'll need to file Form 1439 with the IRS to report the identity theft, Alicia advised. You should also consult with a tax attorney specializing in identity theft cases. Resolving the tax implications will likely take months or even years, but with proper documentation, you should eventually receive relief from these liabilities. After the meeting with Alicia, I met with Jonathan Price, a lawyer specializing in financial crimes and identity theft. His corner office overlooked the Boston Harbor, a view that would normally have impressed me but now barely registered. You have both criminal and civil options, Jonathan explained after reviewing my case. Criminally, your sister could face multiple felony charges: identity theft, wire fraud, mail fraud, tax evasion, and securities fraud if she misrepresented these investment opportunities. The potential sentence could be substantial, possibly 10 to 20 years in federal prison, depending on the specific charges and sentencing guidelines. The thought of Rebecca in prison for decades sent a chill through me despite everything she had done. Civilly, you can sue for damages to your credit reputation and financial standing. However, civil action usually takes a back seat to criminal proceedings in cases of this magnitude. What about the people who invested money with these fake companies, I asked. Are they likely to sue me? That's a legitimate concern, Jonathan acknowledged. Even though you're a victim of identity theft, investors might initially pursue claims against you and your assets. You would have an affirmative defense based on the identity theft, but proving that defense would require time and legal expenses. So even though I'm the victim, I could end up fighting lawsuits from other victims. Unfortunately, yes. That's why documenting everything and filing reports promptly is crucial. The more evidence you have that this was done without your knowledge or consent, the stronger your position will be. Jonathan leaned forward, his expression serious. There's something else you should know. My investigator has uncovered evidence suggesting your sister has defrauded others besides you. What? Who else? Former boyfriends, roommates, even employers. Nothing on the scale of what she's done to you, but there's a pattern of financial exploitation going back several years. Small loans never repaid, unauthorized credit card charges, missing cash and valuables. She appears to have been refining her methods, working up to this larger scheme. This new revelation stunned me. Rebecca's betrayal wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment or a desperate measure in a moment of crisis. It was part of a pattern, a character trait I had somehow missed despite our closeness. Or perhaps because of it. My trust in her had been so complete that I had overlooked or rationalized away the warning signs. Given all this, I said finally, what would you recommend as my next steps? If you're determined to confront her before involving law enforcement, proceed with extreme caution, Jonathan advised. Record the conversation if legally permitted. Present your evidence methodically. Be prepared for denial, deflection, and emotional manipulation. People capable of this level of fraud are typically skilled at deception in all its forms. And if she confesses, offers to make restitution, even with a confession and promised restitution, you should still file criminal charges, Jonathan said firmly. This isn't a simple case of borrowing your credit card without permission. This is sophisticated, premeditated fraud affecting dozens of victims beyond yourself. The authorities need to be involved regardless of any private resolution you might reach. As I left Jonathan's office, the full weight of Rebecca's actions pressed down on me. This wasn't just about money or credit scores. It was about broken trust, shattered relationships, and dozens of lives affected by her deliberate deception. I had one more night to prepare for the confrontation that would forever change our family. One more night to grapple with the knowledge that my sister, my closest family member, was not the person I had believed her to be. Thursday evening arrived with a sense of surreal inevitability. I had spent the day reviewing the evidence once more, rehearsing what I would say, and preparing myself emotionally for every possible reaction from Rebecca. I placed key documents in a manila folder, the police report, bank statements showing fraudulent transactions, security camera stills of Rebecca, accessing accounts in my name, and a summary of the total fraud amount. I arrived at Antonio's 20 minutes early, choosing our usual table by the window. Frank, our regular waiter, greeted me warmly. The usual Chianti, Mr. Wilson. Just water for now, Frank. Thank you. I placed my phone on the table, the recording app ready, but not yet activated. Massachusetts was a two-party consent state for recordings, but I had consulted with Jonathan about the legality. In public places like restaurants, there was no reasonable expectation of privacy, especially for conversations conducted at normal volume. Still, I would inform Rebecca that I was recording once the conversation turned to the fraud. At precisely 7 o'clock, Rebecca walked through the door. She looked stunning in a designer dress I recognized from the credit card statements I had reviewed. Her hair was freshly styled, her makeup flawless, her smile confident as she spotted me and waved. Diamond earrings caught the light as she approached another luxury purchase documented in the fraud investigation. Sorry, I'm a couple minutes late, she said, leaning down to kiss my cheek before taking her seat. Traffic on Atlantic Avenue was terrible. I forced a smile, trying to see my sister through new eyes. She looked the same as always, yet completely different now that I knew the truth behind her polished appearance. No problem. You look nice. Thanks. This dress was such a find. End of season sale at Neiman Marcus. Another lie. According to the credit card statement, she had paid full price using a card opened in my name. Frank appeared with menus, though we rarely needed them after years of dining here. The usual appetizers to start calamari and bruschetta. Sounds perfect, Rebecca agreed. And I'll have a glass of the Prosecco. Just water for me, I repeated. I need to stay clear-headed tonight. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. Everything okay? Trouble at work? We'll get to that, I said. How's your job going? Any new projects at that financial technology company? Her eyes lit up as she launched into elaborate descriptions of marketing campaigns and client acquisitions, each detail a fabrication, since the company itself didn't exist. I listened with a strange detachment, noting how skillfully she created this fictional professional life, how convincingly she played the role of successful marketing executive. Our appetizers arrived, and Rebecca continued dominating the conversation, talking about a weekend trip she was planning to Martha's Vineyard with friends. You should come along, she suggested, dipping calamari into marinara sauce. The house we rented has an extra bedroom, and you could use a break. You seem tense lately. I can't afford luxury weekends right now, I said, seizing the opening. I've been having some financial issues. Concern immediately shaped her features. What's wrong? Market downturn affecting your clients? Or is it something personal? Very personal, I confirmed. My identity was stolen recently. I watched carefully for any reaction, any tell that might reveal her guilt. A slight widening of her eyes was the only sign that my words had affected her. That's terrible. How did it happen? Have you reported it? Oh yes, I've reported it. Filed a police report, met with fraud investigators, hired a private detective. The whole process has been enlightening. She reached across the table to squeeze my hand sympathetically. I'm so sorry, Ron. Identity theft is such a violation. Did they catch who did it? I met her eyes directly. Yes, they did. Something in my tone must have registered because she withdrew her hand slowly, her expression shifting subtly. That's good then. Right. Problem solved. Not quite solved, I said, keeping my voice steady. The damage is extensive. $800,000 in fraud, dozens of victims, tax liabilities, credit destruction. Frank returned to take our main course orders. Rebecca ordered osso buco while I asked for more time. As soon as he left, I activated the recording app on my phone. I should mention that I'm recording our conversation now, I said calmly. For documentation purposes. Rebecca's smile faltered slightly. Why would you need to record a dinner conversation? Because I want to be sure I have an accurate record of your response to what I'm about to say. I opened the manila folder and slid the police report across the table. This is a police report detailing identity theft, wire fraud, and tax evasion committed using my personal information. Rebecca glanced at the document without touching it. I don't understand why you're showing me this. The evidence is conclusive, Rebecca. Bank security footage, IP address traces, phone records, property documents, wire transfer authorizations, all pointing to one person. I paused, watching her face carefully. You. For a moment, she maintained her confused expression, then attempted a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. That's ridiculous. Why would I steal your identity? I have my own career, my own money. No, you don't, I said quietly. Your financial technology company doesn't exist. Your marketing position is fictional. Your apartment, car, clothes, jewelry, all purchased with money stolen using my identity. I placed security camera stills on the table. This is you at First National Bank withdrawing $8,000 from an account opened in my name. This is you signing lease documents for a Mercedes, using a business registered with my social security number. This is you entering the Seaport condominium you purchased with a down payment drawn from fraudulent investment accounts. Her smile vanished, completely replaced by a hard, calculating look I had never seen before. These could be anyone. The images are grainy. The forensic accountant traced every dollar, Rebecca. The private investigator documented your movements for weeks. The evidence is overwhelming and incontrovertible. Around us, The restaurant continued its normal evening service. Couples chatting over wine, waiters delivering steaming plates of pasta, a birthday celebration with singing at a corner table. Our private apocalypse was invisible to everyone else. "I don't know what you think you've found," Rebecca said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper, "but you're making a serious accusation without understanding the full picture." "Then explain it to me," I challenged. "Explain how businesses I never created are registered with my social security number. Explain how accounts I never opened are funding your lifestyle. Explain how 56 people invested money with companies bearing my credentials that I never authorized." A flash of surprise crossed her face at the mention of the specific number of investors. She hadn't expected me to know that detail. "You're my brother," she said, changing tactics, her eyes suddenly welling with tears. "How can you think I would do something like this to you, after everything we've been through together?" "That's exactly what I've been asking myself," I replied, unmoved by the tears I now recognized as tactical. How could my sister, who I protected and supported for decades, systematically steal my identity and destroy my financial security? How could you look me in the eye every Thursday night across this very table while you were actively defrauding me? Rebecca's tears vanished as quickly as they had appeared. Her expression hardened again, but now with a hint of desperation. "You have no idea what it's been like living in your shadow. Perfect Ronald, with his perfect career and perfect life. Always the successful one, always the responsible one, always the one our parents praised while I struggled. So this was revenge, jealousy. It was taking what I deserved," she hissed. "Do you know how hard I worked at those jobs that kept laying me off? How qualified I was for positions that went to less deserving candidates? You had everything handed to you while I fought for scraps." Her version of our lives was so distorted, so contrary to reality, that I momentarily lost my carefully maintained composure. "Handed to me, I worked through college. I built my career through consistent effort and integrity, and I supported you through every setback, Rebecca. I loaned you money, co-signed your leases, stayed up nights helping you prepare for interviews. I believed in you when no one else would." "You enjoyed playing the hero," she countered. "Poor, struggling Rebecca, lucky to have such a generous big brother. You never saw me as an equal. You saw a charity case." Her words stung because they contained a kernel of truth distorted beyond recognition. Had I sometimes felt superior in my stability compared to her chaos? Had my support sometimes come with an undercurrent of condescension? Perhaps, but nothing justified what she had done. "Even if that were true," I said, regaining my calm, "it wouldn't justify stealing my identity and defrauding innocent people. This isn't just about me, Rebecca. There are dozens of victims who invested their savings believing they were working with legitimate companies." "Those people are fine," she scoffed. "They're all wealthy. They can afford the loss." "That's not for you to decide. And it's not true. Michael Dawson interviewed several of your victims. One couple invested their entire retirement fund. A single mother put in money saved for her daughter's college education." For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine discomfort cross Rebecca's face. She hadn't considered the human cost of her actions, or had deliberately avoided thinking about it. Frank approached our table again. "Are we ready to order entrees?" "We need a few more minutes," I said, not breaking eye contact with Rebecca. When Frank left, Rebecca leaned forward, her voice low and urgent. "What do you want from me, Ronald Money? I can pay you back. Not all at once, but over time. This isn't about money anymore. It's about accountability. The police and FBI are already involved. The evidence has been submitted. There's no scenario where this simply goes away. You're sending me to prison." Her voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. "Your own sister. You sent yourself to prison when you committed multiple felonies," I replied evenly. "But you have options that could affect the severity of the consequences." "What options?" "Voluntary surrender, full cooperation with authorities, complete disclosure of all accounts and transactions, genuine remorse and acceptance of responsibility. These factors can significantly impact sentencing decisions." Rebecca's eyes darted around the restaurant, calculating, assessing. For a moment I thought she might simply get up and run. But where would she go? Her face was on file with law enforcement now. Her passport would trigger alerts. "And if I don't cooperate?" she asked finally. "Then the prosecution will seek maximum charges and penalties. Wire fraud alone carries up to 20 years. Add identity theft, tax evasion, securities fraud, you could spend decades in prison rather than years." The color drained from her face as the reality of her situation finally seemed to register. "I never meant for it to get this far," she whispered. "It started small. Just a credit card to help with expenses when I lost my job again. Then another account when opportunities came up. Then the business registrations when I realized how easy it was to use your credentials. It snowballed." That doesn't excuse it. I know she admitted the first honest thing she had said all evening. I know it doesn't. We sat in silence for a long moment. The weight of everything between us, the shared childhood, the bond, through our parents' divorce, the years of what I had thought was mutual support, and now this catastrophic betrayal pressing down, like a physical presence. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "Tonight you go home and think about your options. Tomorrow morning you contact this attorney." I slid a business card across the table who specializes in financial crimes. "You tell him everything, hold nothing back. He'll arrange your surrender to authorities and begin negotiating with prosecutors. And if I don't show up tomorrow, then Detective Martinez executes the arrest warrant, first thing Saturday morning, likely at your workplace or home with media coverage that ensures maximum public exposure." Rebecca flinched at the mention of the detective's name and the specificity of the timeline. She realized I wasn't bluffing or threatening. The machinery of justice was already in motion. She stood abruptly, gathering her designer purse. "I need time to think." "Don't do anything that will make your situation worse," I warned. "Don't attempt to transfer or hide assets. Don't try to leave the country. Don't destroy evidence. These actions will only add charges and extend your eventual sentence." Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they seemed genuine. "I'm sorry, Ronald. Not that it matters now, but I am sorry." Before I could respond, she turned and hurried out of the restaurant, leaving me alone at our table by the window, where we had shared so many meals and confidences over the years. Frank returned, concerned. "Is everything okay, Mr. Wilson? Your sister left in quite a hurry." "No, Frank, everything is not okay," I said quietly. "But someday it might be again. Just the check, please." As I paid the bill with cash, not trusting any of my cards at this point, I felt a strange mixture of grief and relief. The confrontation was over. The truth was out. The sister I thought I knew was gone, perhaps had never really existed, but the pretense and deception were finished. Whatever came next would at least be grounded in reality, painful, though that reality might be. The days following my confrontation with Rebecca unfolded like scenes from a movie I never wanted to star in. Friday morning, I received a call from Detective Martinez. "Your sister didn't contact the attorney you recommended," she informed me. "And there's more concerning news. She checked out of her apartment last night, taking only a few personal items. Her phone has been turned off. We're tracking her credit cards and bank accounts for activity." My stomach sank. Despite my warnings, Rebecca had chosen to run. Any idea where she might go? "We're checking transportation hubs, but she has a significant head start. I've requested airport security footage and passenger manifests for flights leaving Logan last night. Given the international transfers your investigator uncovered, she may be attempting to flee the country." I thought of Rebecca's favorite travel destinations, her network of friends and acquaintances. "She speaks French," I offered. "She studied abroad in Paris during college and always talked about living there someday." "That's helpful information. I'll alert our international partners." 3 days later, Rebecca was apprehended at Montreal Pierre Elliott Trudeau International Airport, attempting to board a flight to Paris. She had dyed her hair blonde and was traveling under a fake passport, but facial recognition software flagged her for additional screening. Canadian authorities detained her until FBI agents arrived to escort her back to Boston. News of her arrest made local headlines. "Boston woman arrested in $800,000 identity theft scheme." The articles didn't initially mention our relationship, but that detail emerged in subsequent coverage. My phone exploded with calls and texts from friends, colleagues, and clients who recognized my name in the stories. Frank Richardson, my boss, called an emergency meeting with me and the firm's legal counsel. "We need to get ahead of this," he said gravely. "Our clients are already asking questions." The firm issued a statement clarifying that I was the victim, not the perpetrator of the fraud. Frank arranged for me to take a paid leave of absence while the legal proceedings unfolded. "Take the time you need," he said kindly. "Your job will be here when you're ready to return." Not all responses were so understanding. Some clients withdrew their accounts despite the firm's assurances. Colleagues avoided me in the hallways as if identity theft might be contagious. Invitations to industry events mysteriously disappeared. The hardest conversation was telling my parents. I flew to Florida, believing this news needed to be delivered in person. They sat stone-faced in their small living room as I explained what their daughter had done to their son. "There must be some mistake," Mom insisted, her hands trembling. "Rebecca wouldn't do this. She couldn't." Dad, always more pragmatic, asked about the evidence. When I showed them the security camera footage and financial documentation, his face crumpled. "Where did we go wrong with her?" "You didn't go wrong," I assured them. "This isn't your fault. Rebecca made her own choices." They aged visibly that weekend, the knowledge of their daughter's crimes and impending imprisonment weighing on them like physical burdens. I arranged for a local therapist to meet with them and left contact information for support groups for families of incarcerated individuals. Back in Boston, the legal process ground forward. Rebecca was charged with multiple federal felonies: identity theft, wire fraud, mail fraud, bank fraud, tax evasion, and securities fraud. The prosecutor's office, seeing the strength of the evidence, pushed for a plea deal rather than a lengthy trial. Rebecca finally followed my advice and hired the attorney I had recommended. Stanley Greenbaum specialized in financial crimes and negotiated a plea agreement that avoided the maximum penalties but still carried significant consequences. 6 weeks after our confrontation at Antonio's, I sat in a federal courtroom watching my sister enter a guilty plea to reduced charges. She looked small in her navy blue pantsuit, her recently blonde hair now returning to its natural brown at the roots. When the judge asked if she wanted to make a statement, she turned toward where I sat in the gallery. "I betrayed the person who always supported me," she said, her voice steady, despite the tears tracking down her cheeks. "I convinced myself I was entitled to take what wasn't mine because of perceived injustices in my life. I lied to myself as much as I lied to others. I hurt innocent people, including my own brother. There's no justification for what I did, only explanation and regret. I accept full responsibility for my actions and their consequences." The judge sentenced her to 8 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole after 5 years plus restitution payments to all victims. As the bailiff led her away, Rebecca looked back at me one last time. I didn't wave or nod. I simply met her gaze, acknowledging what had happened between us without offering forgiveness I wasn't yet ready to give. The following months were dedicated to rebuilding my financial life. The IRS created a specialized case file for my situation, assigning an advocate to help navigate the complex process of separating legitimate from fraudulent tax liabilities. Credit bureaus issued fraud alerts and eventually removed the fraudulent accounts from my reports, though my credit score remained damaged. Some of Rebecca's victims filed civil suits against me despite my status as a victim myself. The litigation dragged on for months before most cases were dismissed or settled for nominal amounts once the facts became clear. A few victims, understanding my situation, redirected their legal efforts toward recovering assets Rebecca had hidden. Dr. Chen continued to help me process the psychological trauma of Rebecca's betrayal. "Family estrangement is its own form of grief," she explained. "You're mourning the relationship you thought you had, and the sister you believed you knew." 6 months after Rebecca's sentencing, I returned to work full-time. Some clients had left permanently, but others returned once the dust settled. Frank assigned me to work with our most loyal accounts while I gradually rebuilt my client base. "Your personal experience with financial fraud gives you unique insight," he pointed out. "Use it to help others protect themselves." Taking his advice, I developed a seminar on identity protection and fraud prevention. I began speaking at community centers, retirement homes, and eventually industry conferences. Sharing my story became part of my healing process, transforming my personal tragedy into a cautionary tale that might help others avoid similar experiences. I visited Rebecca in prison once a year after her sentencing. The visitor's room was sparse but clean, filled with other families maintaining connections despite concrete walls and steel bars. When Rebecca was let in, I barely recognized her. Prison had stripped away her designer clothes, professional makeup, and carefully maintained hairstyle. She looked older, more subdued, but also somehow more authentic than she had in years. "I didn't expect you to come," she said after we sat across from each other at a small table. "Neither did I admitted. "But I had questions only you could answer." "I'll tell you anything you want to know," she promised. "No more lies." We talked for the allotted hour, covering ground we hadn't been able to address during our confrontation at Antonio's. She explained how her fraud had evolved from desperate measures during unemployment to calculated schemes as she discovered how easily she could exploit my information and trust. She acknowledged the rationalization and compartmentalization that had allowed her to sit across from me week after week while systematically undermining my financial life. "Did you ever really care about me?" I asked finally. "Or was I always just a resource to exploit?" "Both," she answered, surprising me with her candor. "I loved you as my brother depended on you, admired you. But I also resented you, envied your success, and ultimately convinced myself that taking from you wasn't really wrong because you had so much and I had so little. It was a twisted logic that made sense only in my most self-centered moments." I left the prison without promising another visit. The conversation had provided some answers, but not the closure I had hoped for. That I was learning would have to come from within myself rather than from Rebecca. 2 years after Rebecca's sentencing, most of the practical matters had been resolved. My credit had been restored. The tax issues largely settled, the civil suits dismissed or resolved. The financial damage, while substantial, was not permanent. The emotional damage was another matter entirely. I had built new routines to replace the Thursday dinners with Rebecca. I joined a community basketball league, reconnected with college friends I had neglected, and even began dating again after a long period of avoiding romantic entanglements. Jessica, a kindergarten teacher I met through a mutual friend, approached our relationship with patience as I worked through my trust issues. "Not everyone will betray you," she reminded me when my insecurities surfaced. "Some people are exactly who they appear to be." On a crisp fall evening, 3 years after the confrontation, I found myself walking past Antonio's restaurant. I hadn't returned since that fateful night with Rebecca. On impulse, I pushed open the door and asked for a table by the window. Frank, still working there after all this time, recognized me immediately. "Mr. Wilson, it's been too long." "Yes, it has," I agreed, settling into the familiar chair with its view of the street. "The usual Chianti?" he asked, as if no time had passed. "Yes, please." As I sipped the wine and studied the menu I had once known by heart, I realized something had shifted within me. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed. The raw wound of betrayal had gradually become a scar, still visible, still sensitive to the touch, but no longer bleeding, no longer dominating my consciousness. Rebecca would remain in prison for at least 2 more years. My parents had visited her monthly until Dad's health declined further. Mom still went when she could, keeping me updated on Rebecca's participation in prison education programs and therapy sessions. I didn't know if I would ever fully forgive her, or if our relationship could ever be rebuilt on a foundation of genuine trust. But I had reclaimed my life from the shadow of her betrayal. The experience had taught me painful but necessary lessons about trust, boundaries, and human complexity. People are rarely all good or all bad. Even those closest to us can harbor darkness we never suspect. Protection against betrayal isn't found in isolation or cynicism, but in balanced trust, openness to connection, combined with appropriate verification and boundaries. As I paid my bill and stepped back onto the sidewalk, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The sister I thought I knew was gone, but the person I had become through this ordeal was stronger, wiser, and ultimately more whole. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone close to you? How did you rebuild trust afterward? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. And remember to protect your personal information, even from family members. Sometimes the greatest threats come from those we least suspect. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find healing from whatever betrayals you've faced in your own life.